we'll continue our series about cities. And we're talking about Jericho today. We talked about cities a couple weeks ago. There's so much space on the planet that the world keeps moving into cities. 5 million more people every month do that. And New York City is the greatest city on the earth, right? So, no one here is going to debate that, right? And, you know, when we think about the Bible, we often think that it's about people in the desert and people out in the mountains and people on lakes, and there are those things. But it's often overlooked that it's very much an urban book. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, how 50 out of the 150 Psalms are city Psalms. The prophets are mostly city-based. And Jesus himself made his triumphal entry and the triumphal end, the resurrection, in the city. It's where people congregate. It's where the message goes out. It's where people are impacted and in the greatest way. We talked about the Tower of Babel a couple weeks ago. The tower was built to reach God, and for those people that were there to make a name for themselves, we talked about our tower. What are we building? Why are we building it? This week, Jericho. I stalled enough for you guys to get to Joshua 6, but here's the thing. We can't just jump into it yet, because the thing is that there's some context that we need to hear about. The Israelites have quite a history happening here. And first of all, this is a little sketch my brother did, just doodling one day. He thought I should give him a little bit of props here, since that's inspired me in my study. So this is the walls of Jericho coming down in his brain. Scary brain that it is. But we're going to need some context here to help us understand the Israelites. And so I brought a video, and this is actually a video resource for me that I go to often when I'm having a hard time figuring out, how does this all connect, the history, and where is this on the map, and all that kind of stuff. So I pray that it's equally helpful for you. It's a couple of minutes, and it's going to kind of go through a little bit of the context here. You guys ready? All right, here we go.
Okay. We're using our imagination.
Oh. So these must be the Israelites.
Yep.
Why are they up here in the middle of nowhere?
Oh, now that is a good question. Have you ever heard of a guy named Moses?
Isn't he the one who parted the Red Sea?
Right again. But we're going to go back a little further. The Israelites were living in Egypt, but not because they wanted to. No, the Egyptians had taken them captive and were making them work very hard as their slaves. It was miserable. But God cared about the Israelites, so he sent Moses to lead them out of Egypt to get into their own land, the promised land.
This is the promised land?
No. Oh, the land God promised them was wonderful. You could grow things and there was lots of food. No, this is the desert.
So why are they here?
Yes, that is the point. When Moses and the Israelites left Egypt, all they had to do was follow God's directions and they'd go right to the promised land. But they didn't always follow God's directions. Sometimes they went their own way instead.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, Moses led them to the promised land right away. But when some of the Israelites took a look around, they saw people there that looked like giants. That scared them so much, they wouldn't go in. They got to the land God promised them, and then they turned around and ran away.
Oh, my.
Now, God was very disappointed in the Israelites for not following his directions. So he told them that none of them could go into the promised land for 40 years.
You're kidding me.
Nope. That's why they're stuck here in the desert.
Wow.
By the time 40 years had gone by, Moses had died.
I thought this story was about him.
No, it's about Joshua.
Joshua? Who's he?
Well, he was Moses' helper. When Moses died, Joshua became Israel's new leader.
Do I know you?
I'm the narrator. Oh. The Israelites were very sad about Moses dying because he was a great leader. But at last, it was finally time. So off they went. After 40 years, the Israelites were finally going to their new homes. With a big grin, Joshua led his people into the Promised Land. Unfortunately, he overlooked one little detail. Jericho.
Thank you, VeggieTales, for that. VeggieTales is fantastic. Maybe some of you know about it, maybe some of you don't. The kids actually fell so much in love with VeggieTales that they use this as an argument for why they don't want to eat vegetables. Because they say, well, I will eat Larry, and I don't want to eat Larry, and be hurt by that. So just a warning in case you were thinking about that, parents, be ready for that. All right, Joshua chapter 6. Hopefully you got the gist of that, and the context, and the history of Israel, and what they're up against now. Verse 1. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets and ram horns in front of the ark. And on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast of the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, every man straight up. Verse 6, so Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark and the covenant of the Lord, and have 7 priests carry the trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the people, advance, march around the city, and with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. Drop down to verse 10. It says, but Joshua had commanded the people, do not give a war cry, and don't raise your voices, don't say a word, until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. Verse 14 says they did this for 6 days. Drop down to verse 15. It says on the 7th day, they got up at daybreak, marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Amen. Verse 20 closes out, says, when the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed, so every man charged straight in, and they took the city. A few observations about the text. The first is pride before the fall. Pride before the fall. That's number 1. It says in verse 1 in the text, now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. In military strategy, this is called armadillo style. I'm just kidding. I don't know what it's called, but that's what I call it. This is when you totally close up shop, the walls go up, no one's coming in, no one's going out. They've got everything they need on the inside. 3 chapters earlier, they took a huge harvest, and in that harvest, they had enough food to last for several months. And so we know that they're all inside these huge walls, and they're ready for anything. Any kind of siege or weather problem, they're good to go. An excavation of the site of Jericho, which has happened multiple times, and this is not a story that's just one of those other myths that people can debate about in the Bible. We have a lot of evidence. We have the wall. We've got the villages. We might even have the house of Rahab. That's a whole other story. We can talk about that later. But here we found some pots, not we as in I, but we as in the human race went down there and dug some sand up. And these pots were still full of grain. Since 1500 BC, these had not been touched. That means that the siege that Israel had, those first 7 days, happened at the beginning. Right then and there, 3 chapters earlier, we know they just took up the harvest. So again, it places it in time. It places it geographically. The Bible is true. It's in a perfect military position as well. You got to capture Jericho as sort of the entry point into Canaan. It's perfectly positioned on a hill country, on top of the hill. It's like militarily perfect. And the first line of defense is at the base of the hill. I don't know if you can see this from the back, but can you see that little woman up there, kind of for size? This is like a 20-foot wall, a revetment wall. Down at the very bottom, there's a ditch here, and then this is the beginning wall. This would be the outer wall. Then, if you were able to scale that and go on the other side of the wall, there's some space, and then you get the inner wall. Does that make sense? So 2 walls protecting the city, and some people actually live between those 2 walls. So double defenses. It was totally shut down, hard defense, impenetrable, nothing in and nothing out. And you know what that means, right? It's going to fall. I mean, you just set a target on yourself when you do that. It's like, hey, we got the biggest, baddest thing around. We got a wall no one can get through. And they were proud about their wall. They bragged about their wall. Our wall's impenetrable. What do you think's going to happen? Eventually that thing's going to go down. Pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18. The human heart is actually very similar to the walls of Jericho. We can be tightly shut up. Nothing going in, nothing coming out, defensive, impenetrable, closed off. And maybe you can relate to even feeling that at different times in your life. And in the same way, if we get filled with pride, if we become an impenetrable wall that at some point we might even brag about, ooh, my independence, ooh, I can handle it on my own, we're putting a target on ourselves that it's going to fall. And sometimes it can be really ugly. I struggle with pride from time to time. Actually, even a few minutes ago, I'm now keeping a pride journal to help me recognize when I have a prideful thought or do something prideful. I've been doing this the last couple of weeks, and I'm reading The Prideful Soul's Guide to Humility. If you haven't read that book, it's a very helpful book. I'm rereading it, actually, because there's some things I must not have learned the first time I read it. I'm keeping a journal, and I'm thinking, and today, as we were taking up the contribution, I had my little envelope, and I put the check in, and I was licking the envelope. And I was like, what's wrong with this thing? It's not sticking. And, of course, it's the one where you peel off the outer layer, and it reveals the sticky part of the envelope, and then you just fold the flap over so you can save your tongue to work, right? And I'm like, what is wrong with this envelope? This envelope is defective. Because I know what we do here at church, and I know the kind of envelopes we have, and so if this thing's messed up, I'm going to need a new one. And then it occurred to me that there was a little flap there, and I did my thing. In my nature, there are times when things like that happen, even little things, and I think I'm right. Based on my experience, based on my knowledge. You guys are looking at me like deer in headlights. You have no idea what I'm talking about. You never struggle with this, right? You've never done the envelope mistake. Okay, I'm just by myself on this one. I got food poisoning last Saturday, and food poisoning sort of, breaks you down in a lot of ways. And I ate something bad at lunch on Friday, and I was taken out by Friday night, and then 24 hours. It was just, I was done. I was spared the details, it was rough, and I'm so grateful that I have an incredibly caring wife who took care of me at night, in the morning. Just, man, she was just like, whatever you need, and just helping me out. And we were all going to go to a wedding the next day in Pennsylvania for her family, and we were so looking forward to it. I couldn't go. I could barely get up. And I just felt like a loser, I felt horrible. I felt like, why does this have to happen right now? And everyone's going to ask, where's John? Where's John? And, well, he's sick. And, oh, he's sick? And, when you hear sick, you're like, well, sick. You can come to a wedding. I mean, the guy's getting married. It's a big deal. You're sick. And I just felt all these feelings. And by the time the family came back, Arlene came in, oh, what do you need? She's just like, amazing servant. And, can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? And already by that time, I was being filled up with pride. Because I'm like, I don't want any more help. I'm done feeling like a loser today. I'm done feeling like everyone needs to help me. I need to get up and I need to take care of myself. And she came in with nothing but love in her heart. And I was like, no, I'm fine. No, I'm good. I'm good. No, can I just watch this football game real quick? I'm sorry. I don't really want to, she's telling me about the wedding and showing me pictures. And I'm just like, it's reminding me that I'm a loser. And so, this is pride before the fall. What happened? Well, we got in an argument. Well, this is a really big deal with me. My uncle got married, and it's like you don't want to